The RA Club is a 22,000 member facility based in Ottawa. 18 adult clubs, activities, sports leagues, house of sports, 13 child and youth programs, food services, catering, facilities, with fitness, wellness, shooting range, archery range, and an outside pool. Pictures there if you want more details. We do recommend check out their website, racenter.com, and they'll provide you with more information. And Steve, did you have something about the youth programs they offer? I believe that was mentioned to bring up.
I just wanted to make everybody aware that the RA offers a wide range of sports and crafting programs for children and youth through the summer, and they're looking to re-engage with providing that full suite for the coming summer. So just wanted to let you all know.
Sounds good. And with that, Steve is the president chair of our canoe club, and he's going to be doing a quick little brief about the RA Canoe Camping Club. So Steve, you might as well carry on us right in through that.
So hello everyone, my name is Steve Dolan, and I've just started my second term as the chair of the RA Canoe Camping Club. Very briefly, I see this organization as one of those wonderful places where community comes to gather in Ottawa around nature and around the outdoors. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so very interested in what Riverly has to say today, because there really is a dovetailing between her work that she does in education and in therapy, along with what we ourselves actually strive to do. So the club, as some of you may be aware, actually has a long-standing history in Ottawa. It dates back to the 1940s. From its first real home was with the YMCA, and then moved to the RA Center in 2012, where we find ourselves today. Now, very briefly, the club, as Dan indicated earlier on, is run by members. We have a very substantial program of activities in terms of covering a range of things like flat water program, whitewater program, family camping and canoeing program. We offer training. I would say on all of our training is certified either by Paddle Canada or the relevant certification body. For example, with our sea kayaking program as well, which I forgot to mention, we have a sea kayaking program. So we have training is provided by licensed instructors who are actually all volunteers. We have a rather impressive shed of equipment to support people's participation in these activities with canoes and kayaks, flatwater canoes, whitewater canoes, and associated gear, life jackets, barrels, all that sort of stuff. So we offer day trips. Members will organize day trips, weekend trips, and longer term trips. Finally, the last thing I just want to sort of highlight actually is, as Dan also said at the outset, this represents our second seminar. We have a rather ambitious suite of seminars we're offering over the coming couple of months. We see it as an opportunity not only to share our love of the outdoors and hopefully provide an opportunity for a broader community of people in Ottawa and in the broader surrounding region to come together just to talk and think about, perhaps even dream about the forthcoming summer. So on that note, I'm going to hand this right back to Dan, who's going to be the facilitator with Riverly for today. I just want to say again, thank you very much for taking the time to spend with us this evening. Dan, over to you.
All right, thank you, Steve. So that's a little bit about the club. Again, we do want to know what you think. And with that, the session tonight is being recorded. It's being recorded for a couple of reasons. It allows us to archive the sessions and also allows us to present it in other manners for YouTube or something that somebody's missed. The videos are off. If you do not wish to turn them back on, that's fine. During the presentation, please leave your videos off, as we have a few people who have limited internet bandwidth. So let us know what you think. Mark's email outreach at raccc.ca is best place to do that. So moving on to the presenter tonight. So first, I'm Dan. I'm the training coordinator with the RA Canoe Camping Club. And River Lee here is one of the co-guides with me at several locations. And she'll be presenting on outdoor education. Quick bio on her. She is a therapy activity instructor, outdoor educator. She holds a bachelor degree in physical education from Brock University and an outdoor education diploma from Sir Edmund Hillary Outdoor Education Centre in New Zealand. Her goals are to help others reconnect with nature and come to understand nature's healing benefits. So with that, River Lee, over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. As Dan mentioned, I'm River Lee. So Dan, you pretty much covered the basics of who I am, but I'll just let you folks know. So yes, my real name is River Lee, and I went to Brock University for my degree in physical education and kinesiology. And I also spent just over a year abroad in New Zealand, both studying and working to become a certified outdoor educator. Before that, I had actually been a flatwater sea kayaking guide on the St. Lawrence River for 6 seasons. And I have always just been a very outdoorsy person, and I will cover that in my presentation, talking about the path that I took to get to where I am today, basically. So I will be discussing my personal journey. I will be discussing everything that I did at Sir Edmund Hillary Outdoor Education Centre, or Hillier Outdoors for short. And I will be covering what all the course entailed, what we did for each section of our course. We did a variety of outdoor pursuits. And then lastly, I will touch on my time in the realm of outdoor therapy. So Dan, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Wonderful. So chapter 1, my path to the outdoors. So from a very young age, living in an area called Rockport in the Thousand Islands on the St. Lawrence River, I have always been very outdoorsy. My mom grew up in Ottawa and my grandmother lived in Gatineau, so I regularly spent pretty much my whole summers out on this mountain, if you can call it that, in Gatineau, camping, fishing, pretty much always outside. You know, it wasn't turn on the TV, it was go run around in the yard or go off in the woods, just be home by sunset. And I was put into a lot of outdoor-based camps growing up, with one of those camps being the Thousand Islands Kayaking Company youth camp. And that was around age 12 for me. Little did the owner, Scott, know that 8 years later, I'd be knocking on his door for a volunteering position, where I started volunteering with the youth paddle program on Tuesday nights. And then I began volunteering to help run their school age programs when people did their end of year school trips. We don't have that this year, sadly, but so I started doing that in 2014. And eventually I helped run 5 weeks of kids camp. And after that, I decided to start taking that on more full time. So instead of working my other job as a deckhand, I quit that job and jumped on to the Thousand Islands Kayaking Company train, you know, both feet in. And eventually I started running the youth programs. So our kids camps out of Kingston and then eventually out of Brockville as well. And I really enjoyed it. I realized that unfortunately, a lot of kids in today's day and age don't have as much freedom as we would like them to have. We very much have parents being worried about every little thing their kid does. And while I definitely understand that parents worry about their children, these children had lost all ability to play without instruction or explore without instruction. And that made me really rethink the structure of the program that I was running. And I decided to make it more educative and get the children engaged, not just with being in a boat, but also with the navigation of where we're going each day, how to look at the weather and decide what we should do, to identify all the local wildlife. I wanted them to become more engaged with their surroundings, because I'll never forget the day I asked them, I said, you have 45 minutes of free time. Do whatever you want. Just go with a buddy." And they all just stood there and looked at me and they said, "Well, we don't know what to do." And that blew my mind, because when I was their age, I was gone before you could finish your sentence. So that really is probably the pivotal moment that sparked my interest in wanting to educate the younger generation, because I quickly realized that if these kids did not understand and care about the environment, they were never going to preserve it. And then I thought about all the future generations, like my great grandkids. They may not get to experience these beautiful things that we get to experience today. So that was really the driving force. But June 6th, 2016 was really the time when I looked into the outdoors as therapy, and I didn't do it on purpose. So at that point, I was helping to run, excuse me, I was helping to run several multi-day base camping trips with the kayaking company that I was working for. And I remember June 6th, I'd only worked a half day. I came home, I'm making lunch. No one else was supposed to be home. Then all of a sudden, my dad shows up at the door. And I was like, "What are you doing home?" And he said, "I don't know. Your mom said to come home." And then before I knew it, my mom's in the house. And I thought, well, this is odd. None of you should be home in the middle of the day on the weekday. You should be at work. And that was the day that I found out my mom had a brain tumor. Now, fortunately, she is okay. It is not cancerous. But with moments like that, it really makes you hyper aware of your mortality and your loved one's mortality. And for a split second, obviously I was very sad and emotional, but my mother was also emotional, and I knew it was way harder for her. So I decided to be her rock. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to get upset. And I hugged her. We spent the night together. And then the next day, I had to go run a 4-day, 3-night camping trip with several of my coworkers who had no idea what had just happened. And I just threw myself into that work, and that community was very supportive. I was so lucky to have that, which is another thing that I will touch on in the outdoors as therapy, is the communities that it provides. And I was so supported with my community and my friends, and also having the outdoors there to fall back on was very comforting. It was very reassuring, probably in a similar way that some people consider church to be, that rock for them. That's the outdoors for me. The outdoors is my church. And yeah, throwing myself into that is really what sparked my outdoors as therapy, and it helped me work through the feelings that I was feeling in a healthy way. I didn't turn to destructive behaviors. I didn't turn to substances. I think I handled it in a relatively healthy way, minus a few hiccups here and there. But that is to be expected with that kind of news. So once I realized how therapeutic the outdoors could be, I started to utilize that more and more throughout my university career. And when I would get stressed, I would go for hikes. Or in the summertime, especially when I had a bad day at work, on the way going home, I would stop at my favorite hiking spot, Leland's Bay, and I'd hike up to the lookout, and it'd be sunset, so no one would be there. And I would just sit there and I would watch the sun go down. And yes, I'd get home a little later, but that was okay, because I didn't want to go home in a bad mood and bring that bad energy into my home. So I started using that to clear my mind. And in one of my university courses is when I really started researching outdoor therapy, particularly among at-risk youth. And I remembered I don't want to take electives in astronomy, like most people did. I want to take an elective in an outdoor education course so that I can be more well-rounded when I go into the world and I want to implement one of these programs for at-risk youth. So I requested special permission from the head of the outdoor education and rec and leisure department, and they said, yeah, you can go into your course with Tim, was my professor, and I did all kinds of amazing things. I learned how to rock climb, I learned how to backpack, I learned how to properly trip plan, which was amazing. And I remember I met this wonderful TA, Greg. And Greg was chatting one night while we were making dinner, and he had just gotten back from a year abroad in New Zealand. He did an exchange, and he was saying how amazing it was and how much variety there was in the terms of the terrain. So you could have mountains and then be surfing later that afternoon. You could be in the desert and you could be in the rainforest. It was just so rich with opportunity. And I thought to myself, that sounds really amazing. That sounds like a great opportunity. If I want to be the best, I need to go there. So I looked online and I saw this place called the University of Otago in the South Island in a place called Dunedin. And I, of course, pulled up the application, wrote out everything I needed to, and I submitted that. And then I got an email back saying this program no longer existed. And I was so devastated because I wanted nothing more than to go there and study and learn from the people that I perceived to be the best. And I actually had some friends who had just moved home from New Zealand. They were living in the North Island in Auckland, and they just had a baby, so they were moving back home to Canada. And I had them over for some snacks one night, and I said, how is New Zealand? Tell me everything. I want to hear all about your life there. And they started telling me about all their amazing adventures. And I mentioned that, oh, I wanted to study outdoor education there, but the program I wanted doesn't exist anymore. And they told me, oh, we have some friends that work at this place called Hillier something. Oh yeah, Hillier Outdoors. And I thought, oh, okay. And I grabbed a pen and paper and I started taking notes, as one naturally does over casual snacks with friends. And I looked up their program, and it was quite daunting, I won't lie. I looked at their tertiary program requirements, and it was a lot of the stuff I didn't have, but I did have a lot of group facilitation experience. I had a lot of sea kayaking experience. I'd been very active. I'd been very disciplined. I thought, I'll give it a shot. Maybe they'll make an exception like they did with my outdoor ed courses in uni. So I applied and did my best to put myself out there and, make it seem like I should be the one they choose out of, I think it's 15 people they accept for the second year program. And I got an interview and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they want to talk to me. So we set up a Skype interview and we chit-chatted, and his name was Graham. Graham was my head instructor. He did my first interview, and he's a great man, but he's a little bit on the shy side at first. So I was already very nervous. And he said, I'd like to talk to you again, but I want to bring on one of the program coordinators. I said, okay, I can't wait. I'll talk to you then. And a week later, Graham and Janet called me back and they offered me a spot in the program, and I could not believe it. Now, it was a conditional spot. I had to learn how to paddle class 2 whitewater, and I basically had to learn how to trad and sport climb overnight. And I said, yep, I can do that. No problem. I had no whitewater experience other than a rafting trip I took when I was 12 and some basic top rope climbing that I did when I was a really, really small child, and I was terrified of heights. But I said, yep, no problem. I can learn. I can't wait to send all my information to you, and I'll see you in January. And that was that. By July, I knew I was going overseas and started planning everything I needed to plan, getting visas and getting housemates and all that good stuff. But going to a school overseas and picking up your life and just moving all by yourself, it has its own challenges. But also, while trying to get my whitewater and rock climbing qualifications, just added a lovely other layer of stress, I guess. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It was amazing, and I learned so much. And I definitely realized that I was a lot more capable than I thought I was. Little did I know what was to come. And I basically learned how to whitewater kayak in one session. And then I spent 2 or 3 days straight rock climbing with a lovely instructor from On the Rocks Climbing Instruction School out in Milton. And then I packed up my life and I moved to New Zealand on January 19th, 2019. And I was very ill when I first moved there. So that was not a great way to start my journey, but it ended up being one of the greatest journeys that I have had to this day. And I moved to a little town called Turangi in the North Island along the Tongariro River. And then I started my journey at the Sir Edmund Hillary Outdoor Education Center. So Dan, you can go to the next slide. Wonderful. So before I go any further, did we have any questions in the chat, or are we okay?
Looks like you're still good to go.
We're good.
The chat.
Wonderful. Okay. So this one is my chapter 2. And underneath it says the longest assessment. And I didn't know this going into it, but it was 10 months straight of assessments. So you can go to the next slide for me, Dan. Now, when I say 10 months, so it was from February until November. Their school year is a little bit different than ours here in North America. And the school was located in Tongariro National Park, North Island, New Zealand. So pretty much smack in the middle of the North Island. And the first week was probably the easiest week out of the entire 10 months, which is saying something, because by the end of my first week, I was covered in so many cuts and bruises. It looked like I had been mauled by a bear. And I'm not exaggerating. I should have inserted a picture, but that was the easiest week out of the whole year. So to give you an idea of just how hard the entire year was. But like I said, I wouldn't change it for the world. It was amazing. And as you can see by the program contents listed on the slide on the screen, we covered a lot in those 10 months. So I will front load by saying, I know I have the number of weeks for each section. We did have a few weeks of holiday, so if it doesn't add up quite to 10 months, that's why. So in our first week, we did what we call group processes, and it connected heavily with adventure-based learning and leadership. So our group processes was more for our group learning how to get along. Since we were going to be so closely connected, there was 7 of us in the second year tertiary program. So we were in the diploma course. The first years are called the certificate course. Excuse me. And for the adventure-based learning and leadership section, once we learned how to get along as a group, we needed to learn how to facilitate others in their groups and helping them work through the hurdles and challenges that they would surely face. So at Hillier Outdoors, we aren't just an education center for people to get qualified. We also run school programs, corporate groups, etc. And we work with a variety of people from, high decile or high SES populations to lower SES populations as well. And each group you get is obviously never the same. So you need to have a good toolbox full of all these kinds of different ABL, adventure-based learning tools and leadership activities. And this included things like the spiderweb challenge, if anyone's heard of that, or the bog challenge, just those simple challenges that really force groups to communicate, work on analytical skills, critical thinking, positive communication, trust, accepting help from others. And to be able to run those properly and for other groups to really receive the maximum amount of benefit, we needed to be good at them ourselves. So that's why it connected so heavily with our group processes. So everything we learned, we were actually put through as students, as if we were the group that we would receive during a week stay at Hillier Outdoors. We also did really in-depth risk management training. So we spent 1 week doing full on, just focused on risk management. However, this was always an underlying tone in everything we did. So even though it wasn't necessarily a risk management training week, for every program that we ran, so if I was running a high rope session, I would have to have a risk management section in my daily lesson plan, and what I would do in the event of life-threatening emergencies if someone were to get entangled in the wires. Excuse me. And yes, SES is socioeconomic status. And with the risk management training, it was a level 6, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head what that transfers to in North America, but basically to get our risk management training certification in level 6 meant that we were qualified to teach others risk management training, which we did get to do later on with our younger class, the certificate students. So in risk management training, we covered things like risk mitigation, how to plan and avoid risk, the different types of risks that there were, but we also did focus a bit on crisis management. As much as we would like to, prepare for it and hope that it doesn't happen, it was very important that we learn how to deal with those things when they did happen. Because unfortunately, risk is an inevitable part of the outdoors. It's not great when it happens, but as long as we're prepared, and then we know how to learn from it for the next time. One thing that we used in our program to really drive home the importance of risk management training was the Multicasualty Gorge Tragedy. I'm not sure if anyone has read about this, if you've heard of Hillier Outdoors. Back then, when this tragedy happened, it was called the Outdoor Pursuit Center, or OPC for short. And unfortunately, it was when a group of students and a teacher went with their instructor, who was pretty fresh in the job. She was, I think, maybe 2.5 months into her career as an outdoor instructor. Now, she had had good training. Unfortunately, this was just one of those situations where there was too many lemons, we like to say. So you count your lemons, and the more lemons you have, the higher the risk. And it was a whole bunch of things that added up to this tragedy. But unfortunately, 6 students and 1 teacher passed away in this gorge tragedy. It flooded and they got washed down the river. And it was very sad. But since then, we have used that experience to help teach and aid our risk management training programs. And now we have some of the best risk management policies in the entire country. And I definitely carry that with me every time I go into the outdoors, especially as a professional, being responsible for other people's health and safety. So our risk management training, even though it was only technically 1 week, it was very present throughout the entire program. We also did a sea kayaking section, which was 2 weeks spent on a smaller island called Great Barrier Island. And it's off the east coast, pretty much parallel with Auckland, if you ever look at a map, so near the top of the North Island. It's very small and it's very beautiful. And we stayed at this isolated compound the entire time and really honed our sea kayaking skills. Now, having had so much previous experience for myself, it was a lot less stressful. This was probably it was one of the other really enjoyable parts of this program for me. It was probably one of my favorite sections because I didn't have to stress about learning the skills. I got to really enjoy paddling amongst pods of dolphins and going snorkeling and free diving and going coasteering around smaller islands, which is putting on a wetsuit and helmet, and you try to get all the way around the outside edge of the island, either by walking or swimming, which was really wonderful experience. I've never done anything like that in Canada. I'm sure it's possible in some areas. And we learned how to basically do everything within a Paddle Canada Sea Kayaking Level 2 skills course. So we learned how to rescue other people, how to rescue ourselves. We also had time limits on all of these things to make us more efficient, but we didn't sacrifice quality, which was also really great. And we also did an overnight expedition that we all planned, and we did have one weekend while we were there over the 2 weeks to have some free time. And some of us went hiking to the highest point on the island. Others went to private beaches to explore the native forest, which was just an amazing experience. And it was an absolute gift to be able to explore this small, very low populated island. But when we came back, we did 2 weeks of rock instruction. Now, what I mean by instruction is when there was instructional weeks, we pretty much learned how to rock climb ourselves, how to build anchors for ourselves, how to do independent lowers when we reach the top of a climb. Basically learning all of the safety aspects and technical skills that were required to rock climb safely in varying levels of difficulty. Anything from, I would say, a 5.2 to like 5.13s for some people. I know in New Zealand it was 11s to 23s. I know it's a bit different with all the different areas. We all have different ways of grading our climbs, but I believe it was 5.2s to 5.13s. And we also got to implement the skills that we learned with other groups. So we had some amazing instructors who would let us assist in running rock climbing sessions with their groups, or abseiling, otherwise known as rappelling from a high point to the ground. We learned how to assist with that as well. But the majority of our 2 weeks of rock instruction was for us to get more experience on the walls and at the crags, and really just honing those skills so that when it came time for us to teach other people, we could be very comfortable in our strengths. From there, we moved on to our whitewater kayaking instruction, which was also 2 weeks. And similar processes. So learning how to get all of our skills really rock solid. So learning all these different kinds of roles, learning how to rescue ourselves and each other in moving water, exposing ourselves to different rivers and different difficulties, whether that's big water, narrow rivers, technical shallow rivers, you name it, we did it all. And we also did a 3-day trip with our whitewater kayaking instruction to really isolate ourselves and put ourselves into that environment fully so that we could focus solely on that. Rock climbing was a lot easier for us to access based on where we were located. With the whitewater, we didn't have a lot of, yeah, so that's an example. We didn't have a lot of places where you had to go for hours before you could get out. So that section of river that's on the screen right now is Tihoe. It is out near Napier, which is the east coast of the North Island. And that's just a grade 2 section of river. But if we go down a little farther from that, that was our grade 3 section of river, where we got to expose ourselves to our first bit of technical grade 3, which was an amazing experience. And again, we would spend our whole days on the river, pardon me, and the days when we did finish a little sooner, there was great pools by our campsite where we could also practice those other skills that we had practiced in a pool, and it gave us really great practical experience. All right, Dan, can you go back to the slide for me? Because I don't remember what's next.
Your next is risk management, bush instruction, and sharing screen for you. There it is.
Wonderful, thank you. So the next week we got to teach risk management to our first years, so our certificate students. And we had a heavy focus on identifying risks and their causal factors. Something we noticed among our first years was that, as with many first years or many people just getting into it, they were a little cocky and would tend to put, safety and risk management at the wayside because they wanted to get out there and do all the things, which was amazing. But we did have a heavy focus on causal factors so that they could carry that with them, not just in their course because they had to learn it, but also into their everyday lives when they were going out on their own time, participating in outdoor pursuits, that they would be using best practices. We touched a little bit on crisis management with them, but it wasn't as pertinent as they were not running many group sessions. I think they maybe had 2 weeks during the whole year where they would help other instructors run their week-long groups. But we did spend about a week preparing that. So we did 2 days prep, 3 days teaching. And it was great for us as well because we got more experience with our teaching and our facilitation. So it's a little rocky when we're teaching each other, but when it comes to, when we're out there alone in the field with our groups, we would be way better at teaching the importance of risk management. For example, when I take a group caving, I know exactly what to say to make them feel safe, but also remind them of the safety side of things. And we also had 1 week of bush instruct. So bush is also synonymous with hiking, forest, subalpine terrain. So we always say tramping and bush instead of hiking and the forest. So for our bush instruct, it was just honing our skills on for orienteering, for camp setup, for local and native flora and fauna, what they were used for originally. So we learned a lot about the plants and invasive species as well. We learned about pest control. Pest control is very prevalent in New Zealand. They don't know 4-legged mammals are native to New Zealand. Fun fact. So they were very passionate about pest control and preserving the native wildlife, including the birds as well as the plants. And we navigated in all kinds of conditions. So of course we had our wonderful days in the woods where it was very beautiful and sunny, but we had days where we were in a subalpine environment and you couldn't see to the end of your nose. It was so foggy. And we had to navigate to cliff edges where there was waterfalls and slide down muddy hills to find these old rickety boardwalks that no one used anymore. And it was really great because before that, I never had really been that strong with my orienteering skills. So being put in the position of needing to use a map and a compass to find my way, where I couldn't just orient myself using landmarks or high points, was really great experience. And I was safe because I was with my group and my instructors who I knew they would push my limits, definitely, and they would let me get a little bit lost, but they would always keep me safe. And that picture on the screen, that was actually one of the private beach areas on Great Barrier Island. And that tree is the Pohutu kawa tree. That is the largest and oldest one in the entire country. So they grow out and away rather than up. So that's one of the many great things that we got to see there in the realm of native wildlife and bush. But all that lovely long grass you see surrounding it is called cutty grass. And that part is not so beautiful. That unfortunately comes home with you in the form of scars on your legs. So wear long pants or yeah, just wear long pants if you want to avoid that. So after our bush instruct, we had our bush expedition, which we spent 3 days, I would say, planning, including our weekends. So even though we had weekends, we often spent it doing the necessary work that we needed for the next week. And our bush expedition was supposed to be, keyword supposed to be 5 days. And we ended up voting on doing it in an area called the Ruahinis, which was just south of us by 2 hours near a place called Taihape. And they wanted to go to Sawtooth Ridge. Now, I'm aware that there is one with that name in California, not the same. So Sawtooth Ridge was just a knife ridge with long tussock grass being the only anchor. So if you fall, you just keep going until you hit the bottom, basically, and nothing's going to catch you. And it ended up being over 100-kilometer-hour winds when we went out there. We spent, that's the Ruahinis there. So we spent 12 hours on our first day, 10 to 10. And we hiked all uphill except for the last 1.2 kilometers. We descended 600 meters in that 1.2 kilometer span. So as you can imagine, our toenails were just in horribly rough shape. And for those who are not familiar with type 2 fun, we'll start with type 1 fun. Type 1 fun is, I love this. I'm having so much fun. I can't wait to do this again. You're very enjoying it in the moment, which is generally what we like to facilitate in the field of outdoor education. We want folks to enjoy what they're doing so that they want to come back. But type 2 fun also has its place in outdoor education in the sense that type 2 fun is not enjoyable in the moment, typically. Normally, you're like, this is so hard. I want this to be over. I am not happy right now. But when you look back on it, you wouldn't change a thing because you learned so much about yourself and what you could handle. And, you know, while climbing to the top of that mountain may have been the hardest thing you've ever done, you remember the view that you had while you were up there. And that is something that is irreplaceable. And for that reason, it was fun. Because how many people can say that they've been to the top of that mountain? So the trip through the Ruahinis, for myself anyway, was very much type 2 fun because it was cold, it was wet, it was windy, and I fell in many holes that were probably like up to my chest height. I'm quite short. I'm 5'4", 5'5". So that was difficult with a big 65-liter pack on and lots of sharp plants called Spaniard. And it was to the point where I spent the last 4 kilometers crying every step that I took. And again, I wouldn't change it for the world because I didn't know I was that tough. Yes, I cried, but I still kept walking. I got to the destination that I needed to get to. And I didn't think I could do that when it got really hard. So when we got there at 10 at night, I just lied down on the deck of our little hut that we were staying in. It was so small. And I just laid there outside, starfish, and I'd never been so happy to sit on a hunk of wood. And it was the best feeling ever. And then I ate crazy amounts of noodles and probably the best meal I've ever had to this day. And we ended up having to readjust our plans and reevaluate, which was also a very useful skill that I learned, was being able to accept change, which is another big thing that we try to teach in outdoor education. It's so much more than just learning how to be in the outdoors and be competent, but it's also all of the emotional and psychological benefits that you get from being out there. And I learned how to accept change and say, I'm not okay, I can't do what we planned. That's very hard for me, at least. I find it very difficult to say, I can't do this. I will push myself to the absolute limit. And that trip definitely helped teach me that it's okay to say that I can't do this. And we only ended up being out there 4 days. And we walked back the way we came. We stopped at one hut along the way, spent the night there. The sun came out for a glorious 15 minutes. And we had a great sleep. We played cards. And then we walked out the next day. And we all got to be home and had a long weekend. But like I said, I would actually still love to go back and try that trip again, but maybe when the weather forecast is a little better. All right, Dan, can you show my slide for me? Thank you. So then the next week after that, which was the most surprising one for me, in the sense that I did not expect to love it, and that was caving. And I had a really scary experience when I was maybe 2 or 3 years old with a cave in Quebec. And I just remember crying, and I was so upset. And my mom got really sick after going in the cave. And we spent a whole week caving, and caving quickly became, and still is, one of my favorite outdoor pursuits. And even though it is so simple, because it's just walking around and crawling underground, it is one of those outdoor pursuits that yields the biggest results, I find, when I take groups into the outdoors as an educator. And you definitely have to face your fears. You'll get the people who are very confident, maybe even overconfident and above ground. But the second they have to go into a cave, they're just a scared little kid again. And it really teaches them how to let their guard down. You don't always have to be the toughest, the best. You know, it's okay to be vulnerable and say to others, I'm not okay right now. I'm afraid. This is hard. I need your help. And that caving week, again, also offered lots of physical challenges as well, especially as a shorter individual. We went into a wet cave. We spent 8 hours underground, going from one entrance to another exit. And the first 2 hours, we went through a squeeze. And by that, I mean the walls were pressing against your chest and back at the same time for 2 hours straight. And the entrance into that section of the cave was an 80-meter rappel down. You had to rappel into an entrance called the Chinaman's Eye. I did not name that, but that was the name of the entrance. And it was so small that your abseil device or rappel device got pinned against your chest, and you couldn't actually lower yourself. So you had to freehand it a little bit on the way down and brace against the edges of the walls. And just before your device came loose, you'd have to grab your rope again and keep going. Then you'd reclip to a new rope, go down again, reclip to another rope, and then you were in the bottom. Now, once we came out of the 2-hour squeeze, that's what I mean when I say it was difficult as a short person, because we were then in a river until the very end. And we traveled upriver against current, and in some areas it's quite deep. So that's why it was difficult for me, but it definitely made me appreciate my abilities, in the sense that, you know, I'm able-bodied, I can do all this, and definitely gave me a new appreciation for my body and the strength that I had, which a lot of students and participants will get when they participate in these programs. They will have this new gratitude for themselves and their being. And we did get to lead a group through caving at the very end, which you can do group facilitation all day, every day, but when you get a group underground, it's a totally different ball game, because sometimes the anxiety takes over and you have to learn how to calm someone down when there is no calming them down, essentially. So it was a big learning curve, but it was one of my favorite experiences. And like I said, it's one of my favorite pursuits now. I'm no longer afraid to go underground. I will take anyone caving at any chance I can get. And next we did Instruct Bush for our Bush Leader Assessment. So this was one of the first nationally recognized assessments that we would receive. And if you passed, you would receive your NZOIA, which stands for New Zealand Outdoor Instructors Association. Your NZOIA Bush Leader, which basically states that you are allowed to take groups into the outdoors. You are competent in orienteering, safely navigating through mild to moderate terrain. You can set up and run camp successfully with leave no trace principles, et cetera, et cetera. So we would take a group out for 2 nights and 3 days, and you would be shadowed by your assessor, and they would just follow you along. And you would have to teach these students how to do all these things. So you would have to teach them the importance of trip planning, checking the weather and what that means for their trip planning, how to pack their bags, what group gear they will need, how to orient their map using features as well as compass bearings, navigating on a compass bearing, teaching them basically all the things that you learned while you were in your Bush Instruct session. And if you couldn't fulfill it within that 1 week, Hillier was really great with allowing you to fill in the gaps where you were able. For example, I was very ill during my Bush Instruct, so I filled in my session for that over 2 different co-instruct sessions. And I was very fortunate that I had some great leaders that would allow me to do that. So with that being said, with the New Zealand Outdoor Instructors Association, the great thing about your assessments is they are flexible. Obviously, there's a certain standard that you must achieve. But if you teach a skill that maybe isn't by the book, let's say, it isn't the #1 way or role model way to teach it, but it's still within reason and safe and effective, you can justify that to the board and they'll say, okay, that makes sense. Here's your assessment, or absolutely not, that's rubbish. Try again. So it is really great that they are flexible in that regard. And next we did our Alpine Sector, and we spent 3 weeks on the mountain. We did a couple classroom sessions just learning about the different snow types, avalanche danger, and learning how to use our avalanche transceivers that we all had to wear so that when we went onto the mountain to practice finding people that had been lost in an avalanche, we would know what to do. Most of it was spent on the mountain. So our first week, we did use alpine snowshoes and crampons. We did some summits, hiked up to one of the huts. So the slide that we're on right now is actually, that picture is taken from the Alpine Club hut, which is 3/4 of the way up the mountain. And the peaks that we're viewing in the back are the pinnacles, which are popular for ice climbing, which we also did cover, and we did climb in the pinnacles as well, practicing our different ice climbing techniques and snow climbing using snow stakes and ice screws. And we also did some extreme snowshoeing up some peaks that definitely would have been easier to just climb up with crampons and ice axes. But we were very fortunate to have an amazing world-renowned instructor, Paul Rogers. He is one of the most elite mountain guides in the UK and New Zealand, as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure what his reputation in North America, but he's quite amazing and taught us everything that he knew. And we did spend 1 week living on the mountain in a very small hut, traveling through the glaciers, doing a few summits, climbing in some ice gullies, and just learning how to live and conduct ourselves in the mountains, which was a lot more challenging than I thought it would be. I made the assumption that because I'm Canadian and I was born in the snow, that I would know exactly what to do on the mountain, and that was just not the case. So learning how to layer properly, since it is quite a different climate there, it's more temperate, so it was not nearly as cold, so you didn't need to wear as many layers as we do here. And we also covered things like crevasse rescues, which was amazing and very useful, especially if you ever plan to travel on any glaciers. And our very last week was spent assessing our abilities to create anchors, communicate with our climbing partner, the different types of rappel anchors that you could build, which you will get to see an example of in a short video that I've prepared for after this slide. And once we were assessed, we just got to spend the remainder of our time climbing and doing bum slides down the side of the mountain and enjoying some really beautiful bluebird days. Now, unfortunately, there is no Alpine leader assessment. So we just had our basic Alpine skills and there was no solid certification. However, we were very well set to get our Alpine 1 certification should we have chosen to carry on in that line of work. And it made it a lot easier for us to get volunteer or work placement positions with ski patrol and Alpine rescue, which some of us did do. After that, we received our pre-hospital emergency first aid course. So that's otherwise known as PHEC, P-H-E-C. And we pretty much learned everything just below, the people who drive ambulances, paramedic care. So pretty much everything just below paramedics in the sense that learning how to treat open and closed fractures, how to treat all the different spinals, testing people's blood sugars, multi-casualty accidents such as plane crashes and all that good stuff. It was a week-long course, so very intensive, but very effective to say the least. And that's valid for 2 years, and then you can recert. And the recertification is only 2 days, I believe. So it's a nice one, but very, very thorough. And I've definitely felt more prepared than I ever have before with all my previous certifications in first aid and lifeguard training. And we also did 4 one-week sessions in Coinstructs. And with Coinstructs, I touched on that a bit before. So we work with a pre-established instructor. So not our instructors teaching us how to be outdoor educators, but other instructors who were already outdoor educators at the center and running week-long school groups. Now, we would gradually work our way up in terms of how much we led during our Coinstructs. So during your first week, you could shadow, maybe run a few debrief sessions here and there. And by debriefing, I mean talking with the group about your experience that day, whether it's a challenging hike that you did that day, or if it was a specific ABL, adventure-based learning activity that really challenged them. The second one, you would plan to run half of the activities, I would say, with some help from your instructor, your head instructor. And then your third one, you were running most of the daily activities, and you would have supplemental help from your instructor where they would be like your assistant. And then during your last week, it was expected, or at least hoped, that you would run the whole session with requiring little to no help from your co-instructor. And they were just there basically as a precaution to make sure that nothing went wrong for liability purposes and safety. And like I said, you could continue some other assessments throughout your co-instructs if you missed them before. So if you didn't get to teach navigation with a map and compass, your Coinstructs were the perfect time to catch up on those skills. Or you could even use your Coinstructs to practice for your other assessments that you would have. So you had 2 Coinstructs before your bush leader assessment. So you could use those if you wanted to practice the skills that you would have to teach during your assessment to really fine tune your teaching style. And after that, we had to decide what we were going to do for our skill specialization. Now, the tertiary program structure has changed a little bit since I did it. So now you don't have to choose between rock and whitewater kayaking. You get to do both. But during my year, we had to choose if you wanted to specialize in your rock climbing skills or in your whitewater kayaking. 4 of us chose rock, 3 of us chose kayak. I myself chose kayak. I'm definitely a water person. Nothing against rock climbing. I love it, but water is definitely more me, as you can tell from my name, Riverly. And we worked on our role model skills that we would need to perfect for our kayak leader assessments, again, run through in Zoya. Now, that would mean perfecting your role to be role model perfect. So clearly showing each of the stages of your role. So really rotating, tucking, having your paddle clearly above the water, the angle of your paddle blade, and the motion of your sweep, making sure that you're following through with your core, not leaning back, etc., etc. And you also had to be able to do things like complete an all-in rescue, which included 3 clients and yourself that you had to have all rescued in under 5 minutes. And there was also running a group session. So you had to do a whole day where you did a flat water session as well as a rolling session. And in order to be eligible to even be seated in an assessment for your kayak leader, you had to have completed a minimum of 20 rolling sessions, meaning that you were teaching others how to roll during 20 separate sessions. So that was something we were also focusing on throughout the year. So even though we were not forced to decide what our specialty was until later, people were often thinking about that from the start of the year. They do front load this at the end of your first year in the certificate program. However, I was not privy to that part of the program. I went directly into the second year. And I know for the rock climbing folks, they have to have a minimum of, I want to say 45 days on the wall or at the crag. I think it was mostly outdoor. And I think they also had to have 5 to 10 days instructional experience. And they had to run a full day climbing session with a group of students as part of their assessment. And then they had another day where they had to run a client abseil or rappel session. So helping clients go over the edge and rappel down, kind of like James Bond, just with a lot less bouncing off the wall. So that was the rock climbers assessment. And then in between our first week of our specialized skills and the last 2 weeks, we also had 3 weeks work experience. So hopefully this was to help us get a job in the industry once we left. So I myself went with the good old familiar of sea kayaking on Lake Taupo, which is the largest lake in the Southern Hemisphere, and learned a lot while experiencing the conditions out there. It was very interesting. Got into some waves that I've never seen before on any lake I've ever paddled. And I learned a lot. And then I eventually was hired on at Hillier Outdoors after that. Now, something I did not put in this slide, just simply because I forgot. At the very end of the year, we did a week-long expedition, as every group gets to do. And normally you fundraise. This past year, our group did not get to, and because it was COVID, so they couldn't go anywhere. But with us, we decided to combine our rock people and our whitewater kayaking people and do one giant trip together to last 7 days in the South Island of New Zealand. First, we would do 2 days of rock climbing at a place called Paynes Ford in Picton, which is the northwest corner of the island. And then we would travel down almost halfway, so like almost in the middle, to a place called Murchison. And it was along the Buller River, and we paddled all kinds of different sections on the Buller River and the Mataki River as well. And we spent 2.5 days there. Now, I know that doesn't add up to 7 days. We did have to drive to the South Island, which takes a whole day in and of itself, because the ferry is 2.5 hours. And for us to drive there in our 12-passenger van with a cage trailer, it took us like 3.5, 4 hours to drive from our facility to the bottom of the North Island and catch the ferry. And the roads in New Zealand are very narrow and windy, so travel is not quick the way it is here with our highways. So in a nutshell, that's the entire year of Hillier Outdoors tertiary program. Now, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so how are we doing for questions?
There is one question that actually came up, and that is the cost of the course is one that came up, and the other one is SES, socioeconomic status.
Yes, correct. Socioeconomic status. Sorry, I should have clarified that. So yes, when I'm referring to SES or decile, as they say overseas, it's the same as socioeconomic status. And as for the cost of the program, I know, so for New Zealanders, the first year of study is actually free, whether it's in the outdoor program or a uni program. First year of study is free if you're a citizen. For the second year, it's just under 7,000 New Zealand dollars. However, if you are an international student, it is just under $18,000. So it is pricey. You probably have to take out a loan to do it. That's how I did it. But I'd say it was worth every bit, because I learned so much. It's just the contents of the course is just invaluable. You can't put a price on it. It's amazing. And also, if you are Australian, you pay the same domestic fees that a Kiwi citizen, New Zealand citizen would. So it's the just under $7,000.
And that's 18,000 Canadian approximately.
New Zealand dollars.
New Zealand
so
dollars.
It's a little bit cheaper because our dollar is worth more.
Okay, so it's still close to that on conversion.
Pretty close, yeah.
Okay. Awesome, sounds good. Is there any other questions before we move on to? It sounds like the video is going to be next there, Riverly.
Yeah, so we'll have a nice 4-minute break from me talking at you, and you can watch a cool video that will showcase just a few of the opportunities in outdoor education and different outdoor pursuits. I know we all get comfortable in our niches, but there's so much out there that can teach us so much, and all the skills are relatively transferable. And if you're thinking into getting into outdoor education, but you're not quite sure what realm you want to get into in terms of the pursuit that you'd like to specialize in, this will show you a little bit of that, and also show you the communities that are available within outdoor ed.
Awesome. That sounds good. So we are going to go to the video. If people are having an issue with the video, please type in chat that it's laggy or something, and we'll readjust as needed. So give me a second. We'll set that up and reshare it.
Perfect. I'll turn off my video. Okay, so that was, just kidding, it's going. So that was just a short video of some of the pursuits that are out there for you. And I do have a longer video on my YouTube channel if you wanted to head that way after tonight or whenever you feel like it. There's a longer, about 15-minute video that shows you a few more opportunities in the outdoors. I see we have a question.
Yes, it's just whether Benji, it looks like, is looking for more information on outdoor therapy, which I think is our next topic, is adventure therapy.
Yes, lucky for you, Benji. Yes, we're about to cover outdoor and adventure therapy. So I'll give you some more resources on facilities that offer outdoor adventure therapy, as well as some of my experience with the outdoor adventure therapy world, and also what you will require if you want to get into outdoor adventure therapy. All right. So so just a little quote to start us off with. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks, by John Muir. I don't know if I said that right, but he's one of my favorite outdoor writers. And this is something I say to my clients on a regular basis. So currently I have established and run the outdoor adventure therapy program at the 1000 Islands Addictions Treatment Center, helping those struggling with substance addiction and abuse overcome their addiction and work their way into their recovery. And basically our program is to help give them a healthier outlet and just to change some of their behaviors and how they deal with their feelings. But I'll get into that if you go to the next slide, Dan. So what exactly is outdoor adventure therapy? So I have some bullet points here, and it says it's a form of experiential therapy. It's a safe, supportive environment. The experience is the main therapy, and it's a reflective experience. So to put it into a solid definition, it's the use of experiences and facilitation to elicit emotional, physical, and psychological change. So I will just clarify, I myself am not a registered therapist or counselor. However, I would really like to pursue my counseling certification. So this is just from my own research and things that I have learned along the way from my superiors and mentors. And basically, in outdoor adventure therapy, you are just the conduit for which you and nature are the conduit for which their experience happens. So you will help introduce them into that environment, but the environment and the nature is what's going to give them that therapeutic experience. It has very little to do with you as the person. You're there to keep them safe, to help them where they have questions. But it's all about letting the experience, as I said before, do the talking and do the helping, and you can be there to just guide them on the way. So if you want to go to the next slide, Dan. So who can it help? It can help everyone. As I mentioned before in my own personal story, it really helped me overcome my feelings of sadness, anxiety, anger, and gave me a healthier outlet rather than turning to, maybe a darker path or a less healthy path. And right now, I currently use it for those struggling with substance abuse. So whether that's alcohol or drugs, that's what I am catering towards right now. However, before I got into that, I have always wanted to work with at-risk youth or troubled youth or youth in conflict with the law, all of the above pretty much. I have had programs where I have been very lucky to work with differently abled youth as well as adults. And I have worked with lower decile or lower socioeconomic status groups. And while it has its own challenges, I find it to be some of the most rewarding work that I have ever done. I really enjoy helping people. So if you yourself enjoy helping people, then I think this could definitely be a great line of work for you. but it can help everyone, not just, not to, I don't want to stereotype, the rough and tumble of society. It helps everyone, no matter what your background, all walks of life. I see we have a question. So age groups that I've dealt with. So currently I deal with ages from as young as 18, sometimes 16, but usually 18 into their 80s. When I'm working with youth groups, it's usually ages 12 to 18. So currently at the addiction center is ages 18 and up, basically until however old you are and you want to come to recovery. Now, if you want to go to the next slide for me, Dan. So there are so many benefits of adventure therapy or outdoor therapy. So when I say interpersonal skills, I'm going to speak in the realm of addiction for a moment. Now, when there are people suffering from addiction, often when they're in their addiction and using their DOC, drug of choice, whether that's drugs or alcohol, we say DOC. When they're in their active addiction phase, they are often so isolated, whether that's because they're hiding it from their family or they're too out of it to even socialize with their loved ones. They're very, very isolated. And especially for folks who have been using for 20, 30, 40 years, they need to learn how to reintegrate themselves into small groups and then eventually society. So through the outdoors, a lot of our activities, it's very rare, I think almost never do I have an activity where you can work by yourself as an individual. So they are forced to communicate and work with others. And it's a gentle way to reintroduce that before they have to go back to families and jobs and busy cities. A lot of them come from cities. And it's the same thing with our younger populations. So they maybe have not developed those skills yet, or maybe they are coming from a background where they haven't been taught those skills, but you can teach them through these activities. Also, we have emotional healing. Now, whether you planned for that to be your goal or not, it is something that happens when you least expect it, I find. And I'm not saying every walk through the woods is going to be this revelation or this epiphany that you have, but oftentimes it could be the simplest act. Even just standing in the grass with your bare feet and your eyes closed can be so healing and really help ground you and bring you back to yourself in that moment in time and really make you grateful for what you have in that moment, which many people often forget. We often get overwhelmed by the daily hustle and bustle. What do I have to do next? And we don't realize how detrimental that can be for our mental health. So the outdoors definitely helps you disconnect and refocus your mind, which is also good for your body as well. And it can help you break addictions. So if you, let's say, I've had clients who are smokers, and once they get into my full day hikes, which are definitely very challenging, upwards of 10K and usually difficult terrain, especially in the winters, even more difficult, they realize, wow, I need to take my health a little more seriously. I'm going to quit smoking when I leave here. And, I want to be able to do this with my kids and keep up with them. And it can just be a really good kickstart to get breaking those not so healthy habits. Treatment of mental illness is also another one. So for me, I struggle with anxiety, for example. So when I get out into nature, when I get a little overwhelmed by everything going on in my day-to-day life, I'll bring my phone as an emergency, but I bring a book with me. I'll go hike to a very quiet place and I'll sit and read my book for hours. And just being out of my traditional daily environment, which often has so many triggers, can really help rejuvenate my spirit and my energy and my mind. And it's just a very beneficial way to reset. in a sense. Now, I'm not in any way saying that this is a treatment, be all end all for all mental illness. I understand that is absolutely not the case for so many people. It is, however, very supplemental to add to a treatment plan if you do struggle with mental illness. It's great if you have medication that you're taking, you can also couple that with daily mindfulness activities, yoga, meditation, affirmations, outdoor time to spend time with yourself. And yeah, it's just very, very great to pair with that. For myself, I use it as my main coping mechanism, getting outside and doing things. And it can also help you with your coping strategies. Like I said earlier, it was my healthy coping strategy to deal with all the big feelings that I was having that I didn't know how to deal with or necessarily express out loud to another human. So I use that to cope with my feelings and express myself rather than turning to unhealthy ones, such as locking myself in my room or crying all the time or using substances and abusing substances or being angry at other people all the time. It was a much healthier outlet for myself. And I've definitely seen that in a lot of my clients and students that I have had the wonderful opportunity of working with. And they have really retrained themselves in how to cope with certain emotions. For example, I've had a client who was dealing with grief. And instead of sitting there being sad all day, they decided to come on a hike. And while they didn't speak much, it was very healing for them and it gave them something else to focus on. And they realized how beneficial it could be in the future. If they ever felt that way again, they could always turn to that and nature would always be there. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what do you require to facilitate and lead this genre of programming? So a background / education in outdoor education or adventure leadership is always a plus. So if you have your own just experience, that is great. I highly recommend taking some courses, getting some certifications and qualifications behind you before you dive headfirst into this. It's definitely a field where you'd want to have some experience ahead of you for sure. I think as a first-time job, it can be quite overwhelming. I'm not saying it's impossible. I would definitely applaud whoever did that for their first job. So I think some previous experience is definitely key for this line of work. You also have to have really great facilitation skills. You will get a lot of groups who will just stand there. They won't want to do anything until you help facilitate it. And not just telling people what to do and how to do it, but helping pull those leadership skills out of them without you saying you're the leader now. So to help them realize these things without them knowing that you're helping, essentially. You also have to have pretty good people skills. I can be quite introverted. I love my alone time. I love being quiet, but in this line of work, I have to be very extroverted and chat with people about anything and everything under the sun, even if they aren't answering me, even if they are giving me one-word answers. If someone decides, let's say a client is really struggling with something on their mind or a past experience they've had, I need to be okay listening to that and having appropriate reactions to that. So even though some topics that people might want to discuss with you can be pretty heavy, knowing how to properly listen to them, so active listening, and having the appropriate conversation following that is very important. But also making people feel comfortable around you, making people relax and allowing them to have fun while they're in your presence and in your activity is very important. Now, obviously, each program that is offered out there through different companies and establishments will have their own little twist of what they require you to have. So each company and organization will have probably a list of requirements and then a list of assets that it would be good to have. So things like your wilderness first aid or first aid responder, your lifeguard certification, the leader assessments that we talked about before, such as bush leader or kayak leader, any Paddle Canada certs, leave no trace instructor or master leave no trace instructor, all of those types of things will be an asset or required to have, and they will usually tell you this in advance. And also other various traits that would be considered helpful. So you definitely have to be patient. You have to be okay with repeating yourself. It's just inevitable. But patience is definitely the big one. But you have to know how to be their friend, but also how to be in charge, which is definitely a fine line to walk. And you want them to feel comfortable opening up to you, but you also need to let them know, like, I'm the one in charge here at the end of the day. So all those other traits that you think about when working with at-risk populations, definitely make sure, just patience is the biggest one, I would have to say. It's taught me a lot. I thought I was a very patient person before I got into this line of work. And I didn't know that my patience had like 10 more levels below it, but it does. And it's been quite the experience. Like I say, it's very fulfilling and rewarding, but it also helps you grow, and you have to be willing to grow if you're going to be in this line of work. You have to understand that even while these populations, whatever preconceived notions you may have, they have something to teach you. And you have to be willing to accept that and respect that you can still learn things from them. You have to put all that other baggage at the door and leave it there. It has no place in this line of work. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So I've listed some opportunities in New Zealand, if anyone feels so inspired to go there when they're able to. So there's a place called the Blue Mountain Adventure Center, or otherwise known as BMAC, in central North Island, also in Tongariro National Park, or just outside of it. And they are an amazing program. They have on-site accommodations for the people that come and stay with them. They're usually 1 week long programs, and they work more with the lower socioeconomic status groups. And they also do some corporate groups as well, but they do offer the outdoor therapy program for those lower SES groups, or people who maybe don't otherwise have the opportunity to do that. I believe some of their content is sponsored. Also, there's the Whenua Iti. Yes, the WH makes a F sound. It is part of the native language of New Zealand called Maori. And Whenua Iti Outdoors is located on the west coast of the South Island. They are a bit more intense, with a sole focus on outdoor therapy. And I believe it's a longer program as well, like a few weeks. And they are also a wonderful one to go to because they have a heavier focus on it and it's a longer program. Usually the populations that you'll be working with there will be a bit more challenging. So if you want to go to the next slide, I will talk to you about some opportunities here in Canada. So there are several opportunities in Canada. However, this is not all encompassing. There are many more, I'm sure. These are just a few of the ones that I wanted to put out there to you should you decide to get into it. Now, there's the Thousand Islands Addictions Treatment Center where I currently work. We now have one, which I'm so happy to add us to this list. There's also Terra-Centric Coastal Adventures out in British Columbia. There's the Wendigo Lake Program and the Pine River Institute. Now, with the Thousand Islands Addictions Treatment Center program, we have clients staying anywhere from 30 days to 90 days. So there's a 30-day, 45-day, 60-day, and 90-day program. So it's quite continuous with people rotating in and out. I know that Pine River does a minimum of 8 weeks in the woods with their clients. So the clients stay out for 8 weeks straight and they rotate instructors on and off. With Terra-Centric Coastal Adventures, I know that offers outdoor therapy for adults mostly, not with youth. Pine River is more youth focused. Terra-Centric Coastal Adventures is more outdoor therapy for adults, not necessarily struggling from substance abuse, but also if you deal with things like PTSD, anxiety, any of those types of mental illnesses, they can help you with that. And Wendigo Lake, I believe, works with youth in conflict with the law. I know Dan has said that he can speak to the Wendigo Lake program. I know that he has done some contracting with them as well. So if you have any questions in particular about Pine River or Wendigo Lake, I know Dan is very well equipped to answer those. I unfortunately have not yet had the opportunity of working for them, but I hope to one day. Now, if we could go to the next slide, please. So that's just a photo of one of the outdoor education experiences that was offered through Brock University with a 6-day canoe trip through Algonquin. And even though it was an end of course expedition that we all planned, it was also a great learning experience along the way to really use those skills that we had been working so hard to define or to refine, sorry. And also we got to do a bit of teaching with our peers, which was another amazing experience. And I think we have 2 more slides after this. So if you want to go to the next one for me, Dan. So this is a quote that rings very true for me. So nature has been for me, as long as I can remember, a source of solace, inspiration, adventure, and delight. A home, a teacher, a companion. And that's by Lorraine Anderson. And for me, nature is definitely a home. I referred to it as my church earlier. It's definitely a place where I feel so comfortable. If I'm out there in my tent or under the stars, I don't feel any different, other than maybe my bed's a little bit more comfortable, but I feel just as safe and secure. And the outdoors has taught me so much more than I ever could have imagined, and it will continue to teach me more. And it's also a companion for me when I feel at my lowest or at my darkest, or even when I'm really, really happy. I love being outside when I'm happy as well. I don't think I put enough emphasis on that throughout this presentation, but it's also a great place to go and celebrate. And it's a place where I feel strong and I feel capable, but the world never fails to remind me that I am still very small and that nature is very powerful. So if we can go to our next slide. So now is your chance for any questions. That's it for the presentation. And I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for attending and listening. I know that was a lot to take in. But if you folks have any questions, you can go ahead and ask those to me now. I believe Dan said to put them in the comment box below. But if not, yeah, just thank you so much for attending. I appreciated it.
Awesome. Thank you, Riverly. Before we move on, is there any questions at all? Riverly did mention I did work, spent nearly 3 years working at Wendigo Lake and has assisted their Pine River Institute in their field program. So if anybody is really looking at the adventure or wilderness therapy and they have questions about either of those programs, please message me. You can email me at the training account as well. So if anybody has any questions, you are welcome to unmute yourself. I think you're allowed.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Climate change.
Yes, so I actually have a question before that on my private messages here. So how long are the 1,000 programs? I'm assuming that's the 1,000 Islands Addictions Treatment Center programs. So basically it's a continuous revolving door. And as I said, people can stay for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And we do a 6-week rotation. So if you're there for a 90-day program, you usually do start repeating some classes, but there's always other work and opportunities that we can give to those who would like to put in the work. We don't force them to do extra work, but if they want to do that, of course. And in the sense of the outdoor therapy side of things, I'll usually start giving those people a bit more of a leadership role. Now, the cost of those programs, because it's a privatized company and it is not government run, it is more expensive. So I believe for 30 days, it's $19,000. For I can't remember how much it is for 60 days. I know for 90 days, it's about $50,000. So the other one, do you learn / teach climate change? So unfortunately, no, we didn't really have an emphasis on climate change. I do my best to educate through my own personal research when I'm with groups. So really being mindful of our impact on the earth and what we can do to minimize that. But unfortunately, I don't have any professional training on climate change. I really hope to change that. I know the Hillier Outdoors program was doing more in that regard, and especially for respect for the land. And we are the guardians of the land. So it's called Kaitiakitanga, which is basically the guardian of the land and what we do to take care of it. So they have started implementing that into their program. I believe it's 2 to 3 weeks throughout the entire year. So they might do it 1 week at a time in 3 separate spots. But they definitely have started to implement that more into the program now. Unfortunately, it was not there when I was a part of the program. You're very welcome. All right, are there any other questions, whether it was about anything I said or anything that I didn't say? So what kind of positions would be available through 1000 Islands or other organizations? So at the 1000 Islands Addictions Treatment Center, we don't have an available position right now. However, it's always a good idea to put your name out there. Basically, you're just the outdoor therapy instructor. However, if you had your counselor certification, whether that was a counseling certification in mental illness and substance abuse or behavioral sciences bachelor's degree, we accept both. So you could be a counselor or you could be the outdoor therapy instructor, or if you want to be, really amazing, double threat, you could definitely do both. That would be quite an asset to have for sure. And other programs, so I know Pine River specifically has outdoor instructors and educators, but they also have a wilderness therapist who accompanies them out there in the field. So they are there as another layer of support system and can help deal with certain things that you as an educator, unfortunately, are not equipped to deal with.
So Riverly, on that too, with some positions, there's one position in Canada that we also find that's not requiring counseling or therapy degrees, but is the outdoor instructor, professional, or residential care worker. It
Yes.
falls into that one, and that's where, like, Wendigo Lakes will have your therapists and counselors, but they also have outdoor professionals and residential care workers is what they're designated as. And they run, then they'll facilitate the therapeutic program, etc., with the assistance of the wilderness therapist. So they work in conjunction with each other. So there is possibilities to get in without having the counseling degree, but it does help to have those backgrounds.
Yes, definitely. To agree with what Dan just said. So you don't always have to be a counselor. It is an asset, or to even have some background or having done your own research or taken courses in psychology. It's always an asset to have that knowledge behind you. And you can also be an instructor to teach other people how to be instructors. And in terms of earning potential in these positions, so it will vary based on organizations and establishments. So when you're not a certified therapist or counselor, unfortunately, your earning potential is usually less. We are working to slowly do our part to fix this in the industry, but it also depends on funding. So if it's a government subsidized treatment facility, chances are, government has given them a limited budget that they have to stick with. And when you're with a privatized company there who has, funding and sponsors and investors, there is a bit more room for growth in that regard. So you can make anywhere from $20 an hour to $35 an hour, or as Dan said, 30 to 60K if you're not a therapist. So it really depends on location in terms of the area that you're in. And obviously in certain locations, they'll require more of it. There'll be more of a demand. And also what your qualifications are. So Dan, I think there's a question for you.
So, yes, Heather, it's we could do that, and that may be another seminar or question. Did you have anything specific you're wondering about? So with Wendigo, I worked full time with them, so it wasn't even contract. I did 3 years with them, and their program is 12 to 18-year-olds primarily, and it's a split custody, CAS, and private pay system. With some variance year over year, depending. So a lot of the youth I dealt with were last chance before going into adult prisons, is what we got. And everything from addictions to behavioral, emotional. We had one youth in there who had something like 55 grand theft autos and would make what most of us make in a week by selling drugs. So bringing him, sticking him in the middle of the woods, on a therapeutic program was a very interesting first few weeks, because the first few weeks are detox. And the nice thing with Wendigo, it's one of the oldest ones in North America. It's kind of been the leader in wilderness adventure therapy in Canada for a few decades now. But they're also the only program that splits relatively evenly between in camp, in school, dorm style, and wilderness expeditions. So Pine River Institute, for example, the student comes and they spend on average 8 weeks. It does vary, in canoe tripping, hiking, kayaking, mostly hiking, snowshoeing, canoeing is what they do. And they don't see anything but maybe a yurt in the winter for building for eight plus weeks. When at Wendigo Lakes, they come in and they might be in the dorm, they might be going to school. We have teachers on staff, so the teachers there will run school, and the schools run both as an individual studies and learning, as well as a formalized classrooms structure. They'll spend anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks in camp, and then they'll spend 1 to 2 weeks out on expedition on a rotating basis. And the expeditions can vary from 5 days to 14 to 16 days, depending on the trip. Everything from whitewater, class 2, class 3 whitewater, to full sea kayaking, canoeing, hiking, snowshoeing, skiing, dog sledding. So it does vary a lot. Does anybody have any questions for Riverly? Oh, thank you, Heather.
Also, I just thought a little bit more about a previous question about programs that are offered at the Thousand Islands Addictions Treatment Center, and I realized maybe you're asking about the certain pursuits that we offer. So we do specialize in canoeing and kayaking, hiking, snowshoeing, trip planning. We do have them plan trips twice a month right now for a full day expedition. Hopefully, we're hoping to grow it to every Saturday. Right now, it's just twice a month, though, where they plan the entire trip and they figure out what it is they need, what they're going to bring, how they're going to pack it all. And we also do adventure-based learning activities with them. So lots of challenges to assist in those critical thinking skills, problem solving, group communication, etc. And some of the activities that I mentioned before were the bog challenge, the spiderweb challenge, another game called Traffic Jam. Some of them are more mental problem solving, but I try to keep many of them using both mental and physical abilities because it's better for keeping them engaged. And we also do some classroom sessions. Obviously, we can't always go out, whether it's thunderstorming or sleeting and hail. It's just not safe to drive to wherever we need to go, or there'll be low turnout if I make them go out in that weather. Unfortunately, not everyone is as gung-ho to go out in the pouring rain as I am, but we do classroom sessions as well where we talk about outdoor therapy, what its uses are, how it can apply to them, the different communities that are available to them once they leave our facility. such as Hiking Ontario, Climbing Ontario, the Ontario Whitewater Club, the Canadian Alpine Society or Club, all those communities that they can reach out to when they leave. And we also have, of course, good old movie days. Everyone loves a movie day. I'm generalizing. I loved movie days. And we, just look at certain outdoor movies such as Wild or 127 Hours, and we focus on safety and risk mitigation. That way they're more aware when they go outside next. But that's what we offer. But if anyone else has any questions, feel free, but if not.
Awesome. Thank you again, River. Amazing presentation. Again, so anybody, if you do have any feedback, please let myself, Mark,